bigger than rather, yeah. But I'm just saying, it was a little fella. But he was so, I guess, a lot of times when you're small, you act tough, and you're not afraid. You have to kind of bluff your way through. I don't know if that Brother Armstrong's like that or not, but that's the way he was. And he'd walk up in where angels would fear to tread, and would witness and win souls. Well, he became so proficient at it. He became so proficient at it that he got to be in demand at soul-winning conferences. People of the upper crust of the preachers in America began to recognize Carl as a great soul winner. And he was, and he is. But he is ignorant in the sense the word he slaughtered the King's English. He rough, tough, hard to bluff sort of a guy, never really had much of an education. But like Isaiah said, he said, he hath given me the tongue of the learned. That is, God can fix you up like Carl Hatch. And Carl's a good preacher. He took that boy right off in the gutter. He said his head was froze to the curb the night before he got saved with his own vomit as a drunk. And God picked him right up and set him amongst great men. Now that's our verse here in verse 16. And I don't know where you want to go. I don't really care to be hobnobbing around with great men like President Bush. That's not my, you know, I'm not aspiring to that. I do know, though, that my pastor that was pastor in Jacksonville before I came here, he had an 8th grade education. Dr. Bob Engel, you'd never know it. He was so proficient, he had such a vocabulary, such a mannerism about him, such a positiveness about him. He seemed to have his head screwed on right, knew where he was going and how to make good decisions. And he literally hobnobbed with people in Washington, D.C., with senators and people in high authority. He just had that gift. I'm not pleased. People that are watching on this video or whatever, I'm not altogether that much of a follower of people like Jack Hyles, even though he's a good man. And but I never hobnobbed with Jack. He was my age, and he wasn't a peer of mine. I never really, I'm not putting him down, I'm just saying somebody said, you want to go hear Jack Hyles preach? I said, no, he's got to come hear me preach first. I know I wasn't being smart aleck, just something to say, I guess. But you take Jerry Farwell, and of course I never catered much to Jerry. I knew him, he knew me. But he's that sort of a fella that can talk and make his way down through and hobnob with people that are in high places. I've never been that way. I've been a quiet sort of a fella and really not too assuming and not pushy at all. I'm not that type of person. But in our text, it talks about going as high as you possibly can and being all that you could be and should be for the work of the Lord. I don't know, maybe you're not interested in it, but I'm not just talking about the ministry. take like Mr. Colgate, of the Colgate toothpaste people. He was a man that honored the Lord. That's, a long time ago, nearly 100 years ago. But he put God at first in his life, and he said, I want to be the best soap maker in the world. And he ascended to that. Your abilities, your talents will carry you as far as you possibly could be carried. Not everybody has the same talents and abilities, but what you do have, with God's blessing, can make you, again, I want to say, I'm nobody, and God knows I'm nobody, but my name is I see people, I preached down in North Carolina today, and yesterday, or night before last, I should say, and a fellow came up to me and said, I've heard of you all of these years, I'm so glad to meet you, all over the country that way. And it would come because of my stand against the hippies back in the 60s, and I was preaching. I preached against wire rim glasses and flared pants and long hair and beads on boys and earrings, because the hippies were bringing in that stuff into this country, and it made me so upset that I was determined I wasn't going to have that crowd in my church to corrupt all of our congregation with all of their stupid music and all their other bad trends. So I took and people made fun of me. I was kind of a laughing stock. In fact, this fella told me the other night, he said, I was around some fellas that were criticizing you, Brother Green, but he said, I was wrong about that, and I want to make it right with you. So sometimes every knock is a boost. Could you understand what I'm saying? Even when people might not just, I'm not putting a halo, and I'm not saying glory to me, I'm not saying that, but when you just live for God and do what you can do, the best you know how, and stay with it, don't give up, don't go in, don't back off, just stay with it. A lot of folks all over this country respect me, even though they may disagree with me, they respect me. And they'll call me from God's my witness all over the world to pray for them when they get in trouble. I'm not saying I'm anybody, I'm nobody, and I never thought I'm anybody, I never have pushed myself as anybody. But I was going to say, if God could use a rinky-dink screwball nincompoop like me, he could use anybody. I'm telling you the truth.
Amen.
If you just take your hands off from your life and yield it to God, God can pick you up out of nowhere, out of obscurity, and make something out of you for the glory of God. Does it mean anything to you? Do you want something like that?
Amen.
Well, that's all there is to it. I'm saying Mr. Colgate, he just wanted to be the best soap maker in the world, and he was. Mr. Kresge of Kresge Dime Store, it used to be Dime Store, I suppose it's Kmart now, I suppose, Mr. Kresge. They were just selling real good until, I guess, Mr. Kresge died, and some of the others brought in some of those wall-done books in there, which had some child pornography. Boy, I mean, the Christians, they've stopped buying it, Kmart. We about put him right out of business. And they've been almost close to bankruptcy here for several years. You can honor God, God will bless you. You dishonor God, God will put you right back down, pull the rug right out from underneath of you. That goes for a lot of like Swift Packing Company, Christian people to begin with. And I don't know, if you have a talent like John here, playing the piano, that you could take that piano to the highest heights to be used of God in a great manner. It says in our text, a man's gift maketh room for him and bringeth him before great men. There's room at the top for anybody. And develop your strengths and your skills and your abilities. I was talking to my wife today how much I missed her. I was gone for 2 or 3 days preaching in North Carolina, and I told her today, I said, I really hate to let you get out of my sight. I just want to be near you and with you. I said, I don't mind going away and preaching, but it's better when I have you along with me when I do. I said, David Livingston was, his name is at the top amongst Christian patriots, people who made a name for themselves. But Donna, he left his wife and family in London and went to Africa alone. Now there may have been good reasons for that. My wife, first thing she said, excuse me, she said, maybe her culture would not allow her to live in the jungles like him. You take my wife, she could have been right alongside of David, and it wouldn't have bothered her one bit. I mean, she'd have made a little bamboo shack and lived in it. But some other people are not made that way, and I'm not too sure I would be. And I know that at one occasion somebody wrote to Mr. Livingston and said, if there were roads or some conveyance, some way that we could get to where you are, we'd come and help you. But he wrote back and said, there is no roads. Words akin to that. And if you wanted to come, you could come the same way I came. But when he died, when he was buried, does anybody know where he was buried? Westminster Abbey. Amongst the kings and queens of England. At the top, he was in. Who wants to pay the price that David Livingston paid? You see what I mean? If you got the gifts, you have the abilities, you have skills. How do you know, Brother Green? Because God gave gifts unto men. That's what he said. Amen. Everybody's got something that you could do to exalt Christ with, and there'll be room at the top for you. I'm trying to be nice to you. I don't know whether you're a butcher or a baker or a candlestick maker, but I don't have time to just dwell on this verse, but I just, to make it interesting, I mean, Henry Ford was a machinist, but he somehow or other used his abilities to put a machine together that had wheels on it and a steering wheel, called it a Model T Ford. And he got that thing going and became a millionaire himself and kept a lot of other people working, gave other people opportunity because he reached his maximum of his possibilities. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but whatever you have, if you care to, you could let that bring you before great men. You, Daniel, a humble little boy, taken captive, became a slave, became a eunuch, but he promised God he'd not defile himself, and stayed pure and clean. And he climbed from just a little slave boy to next in command in the empire. Can you understand what I'm talking about? It's just the way that things are if you really desire to live for God and take your hands off of your life and let God use you. I'm telling you, Loyal, there's no telling what God could do. If he could take Carl Hatch, whose head was frozen to the curb of this road, street, and lift him up from the dunghill and set him amongst princes. Unbelievable, but God can do that. That's what this text talks about. Talk about like Joseph, little slave boy, like Mordecai, like Esther, like so many in the Bible that God touched and used. Just apply yourself. You could just remain a jerk. That's what you could all your life. Be a stumblebum. Never excel in anything, or you could really go places if you wanted to. And that's enough. I use that verse. I could preach. You could see I could preach. There's preach inside of me, and it comes in and comes out. And when you're preached for 55 years, though, that's what you do. You illuminate and limit. You just kind of just keep that going. But I'm giving God all the glory for that. But I'm saying that's what happens. I'm going to verse 17, or I'll never get anywhere tonight. He that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him. He's talking now about every one of these verses are change the subject completely and become different character building lessons. He's talking here about, let's say John Kerry and Bush are debating, and which they have been. It would seem like if Mr. Kerry said this about Mr. Bush and why he shouldn't be the President of the United States, it would seem like if he had the first crack at it, that it would seem like it would be more in his favor. But if Mr. Bush could say, now just wait a minute, what you're saying is not exactly true. You're making accusations that have no foundation, and there's no facts behind it, and you're saying things off the wall. I don't know how the debate goes. I never debated. I've argued, but I've never debated. But it would seem like if you had a judgment against me, you were my neighbor, and you came over and said, your dog has been over in our yard, and he's got into my garbage, and he's tore the bags all open and scattered my whole backyard with trash. Now, what are you going to do about it? Well, he's cornered, you see. But I would say, now, wait a minute now. You don't know the facts. That wasn't my dog. I don't even have a dog. So it looked like he really had a case, but he said, but his neighbor cometh and searches him out. He's got something else here that disproves what you're trying to say. I could just preach a little, but I don't want to do that. Here Saul, King Saul, was told to go and take the Amorites and the king Agag and to obliterate, take away, kill every man, woman, boy and girl, and even the animals, and completely obliterate them from the earth. Now, you say that's bloody and that's terrible, that's wicked. But don't say that about God, because you'd be saying something you shouldn't say. No doubt those people were idolaters. No doubt that the animals themselves had been used by men in sex ways, and they were polluted, corrupted. You know, where my daughter is missionary in New Guinea, if you shot a deer, you couldn't eat it because it's full of venereal disease. They didn't get that. They didn't get that from animals. It's just the way it is. God said, I want to obliterate this. So Agag went into war and he spared. I mean, I should say, Saul went to war and he spared Agag and the best of the animals. And when he got back and Samuel came, he said, I have obeyed the Lord. And back in the background, moo, you could hear those cows. He said, what is that? They could hear the bleating of the sheep. He said, you have. What is the sound that I hear? Oh, he said, I just saved them so that we could sacrifice with them unto the Lord. Yeah. He had intentions. Now, the first with his cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him. Said that wasn't what God told you. Not only did he tell you not to do that, but he told you not to spare Agag, and you spared Agag. Well, you know, he's king and I'm king, and we're friends and we're brothers, and I've been friends for years or whatever. I don't know all the connections. But Samuel said, bring Agag here. Well, Agag come kind of princing along. Yeah, that's what the Bible said. Yeah. Sort of kind of delicately. He said, surely the death is, all that stuff is, that's not important now, is it? And Samuel took his sword and hewed him to pieces. He said, what did he do that? Well, because Saul had disobeyed. Now he said, to obey is better than to sacrifice. And to disobey is worse than witchcraft. And he said, because you've done this, you no longer will be king. There's a lot more to that story, but I want to show you what Solomon was saying here. Just because somebody comes with a case, you're in the Lord's work. You're out here pastoring a church, or you're here serving in some capacity of leadership. And somebody brings an accusation about somebody to you. That's might be fine and dandy, but I'm telling you again, don't pay any attention to it. Not until you hear the other side of the story, because there are always two sides to this. So if Mrs. Jones comes with a story about Mrs. Smith, you say, well, Mrs. Jones, I appreciate your interest in this, but let me get some more facts together. So he goes, the pastor goes to Mrs. Smith. She said, now, Pastor, it wasn't that way at all. And I never said that, and I never did that. She misunderstood me when I said it. Now what do you got? You got one person that is lying, reconstructing, building a story to try to hurt somebody else. He's saying, what he's saying in our text, don't take what you hear for granted. Now you just listen to this old man, you probably won't listen to me, you probably won't pay any attention, he probably doesn't even register with you, but I'm talking to you after 55 years of being in the Lord's work. You don't listen to just because somebody says something. It isn't always the truth, and they've reconstructed it, they've rebuilt it, they've made it just what they want it to be and presented it to you. But you don't have to take that and listen to that. You listen to the whole story, not just that part.
You're right, preacher.
If you're going to be a leader, if you're going to have some wisdom and direction and leadership for your life, there's two sides, always. And there's, I mean, most Christians will lie to get out of trouble. Well, so Brother Brano, tell me, will you? Just tell me about it. Mrs. Miller, do the children lie in the school? You know they do, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, not our little precious one.
Oh, no, they do.
They lie. They
Very
lie.
obvious lies.
And they go home and tell their mother and dad. And you know what their mother and dad believe? They believe the lie. And they'll come down here and say, I don't want you to my child. Now, wait a minute. You're going to believe your child, or you're going to believe Mrs. Miller? Well, my child would never lie. You're an idiot, too. I mean, that's the way all Baptists are. Somebody said, where do liars go? Parker Memorial Baptist Church. He's well to go to hell. I know they do, but I say, I'm just kidding now. I don't be too serious. But the Windjam, and they'll sort of paint the picture like they want it painted.
Yeah.
And, but you don't believe everything you hear. They said, he said, hearsay, gossip. John, you don't believe it. You don't believe that. Well, if he, I know they said it, but I still don't believe it. I told you the other week, my wife gets so upset at me because I do that. She'll tell me something. I said, I don't believe it. Why, Don? I said, I'm telling you, I don't believe it. I'm going to hear what the other side of the story, and if they never tell me, then I'm not going to do a blessed thing about it. So that's a dumb way to pastor. Been pastored for 55 years.
Yeah.
Never got fired yet.
Amen.
Had a lot of trouble. But, even good people will lie, Brother Armstrong. You believe that? Sure. People do it just to get out of trouble. So don't, our character building, our training, this is a training class. This is not a Sunday school class. It's a training for your lives. Just don't believe it all. Even if you come to me, I wouldn't pay attention to you. Oh, I'd listen to what you had to say. That's it. My boy pastors over in Canada. They try about pastoring something. Try to pastor Canadians. Cold, hard. And he said, the former pastor is his friend. He's an old man, 80-some years old. But he loves my boy Danny. And Danny went to him, told him that this woman had come. He said, Danny, what you do with that woman is look right in her eyes while she's talking to you. Just like you're listening to every word that she says. And when she shuts up, you forget about it. Go on your way.
Amen.
That's what you do.
Good.
What Brother Green had a, go ahead and pastor church 55 years. You'd find out after a while. That's what you do. Well, I do, like right now, I can hear the wheel go on. Does he believe me? Well, I do, but I'm not going to believe something that's cockeyed. It's cockeyed. I'm not going to believe it.
Amen. That's right.
Let me go on. Number 18. The lie causes contentions to cease and parteth between the mighty. This is a strong portion here, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to comprehend what I'm going to say, and I don't mean that you're dumb. I don't want you to twist what I'm saying. I want you to know that in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament economy, they cast lots to settle between two people that are having a problem. And there's many times to keep from having war or being an enemy. So they cast lots. Say, what are you talking about? Well, out in November, what is it, November? When is the election day? 4th?
November 2nd.
Huh? 2nd of November. What are we going to do? We're going to cast lots. We're going to cast lots for a president. That's what we're going to do. So the one that gets the most votes will become president. Several people are running against one another for different offices, as well as presidency. So the casting of these votes, these lots will settle who's going to be the president, or the drain commissioner. or whatever. This is democracy. And you'll find democracy and free elections and free enterprise and capitalism strong in the Bible. That's why it's pretty difficult to be a Democrat. You on the screen, I'm not running, I'm not trying to be smart in it, but we are for not big government. We're for small government. We're for people running their own lives and not the government
Yes, sir.
telling us what to do.
Amen.
And whatever else. I'm not going to get into politics, but our country is called a democracy. And we believe in free elections. And of course, to my mind and knowledge, this is the greatest country in the world.
Amen.
We are part of the free world. Communist countries is run by the government. USA, we elect our leaders, and the majority of votes selects those leaders. I'm thinking about putting this down to your level. In the Old Testament, Brother Armstrong, the high priest wore a breastplate. And in the breastplate was 12 stones, which represented the 12 tribes of Israel. But down inside a little pouch, over the priest's heart, was a little pocket. And in that pocket was 2 stones. I don't know the color of those. I've read the Bible nearly 150 times. I don't believe it ever mentioned what those colors were. One could be black and one could be white. I don't know. But one of those stones was called the Urim, the other the Thummim. And one of them meant no, and the other one meant yes. And so the priest was called to make judgment over some issue. He would pray and say, God, give to us your perfect will. And the stone that came out meant yes,
Amen.
or it meant no. It's sort of like casting lots. It was sort of like making a choice. We used to play ball as a kid, and we'd choose sides. Then we'd throw a bat up in the air, somebody'd catch it. And then this was on this one, this one was on this one, and the one that could not get his hand because the end of the bat was here, he might say eagle claws and put his hand like this. So he got the first choice. Sometimes it'd be so tight you couldn't get eagle's claws. You understand what I mean? So it was a choice. It was like choosing sides, but choosing who bats first. Well, who cares who bats? Well, when you're a 10-year-old kid, it makes a lot of difference who bats. But anyway, to make a long story short, it's a part of God's economy, and has been, from time immemorial, to choose, make choices with casting lots or using the Urim and the Thummim. One meant light, the other meant perfection. That was the name of those 2 stones. If I could elaborate on that, I thought maybe I could. But you know, in the New Testament economy, after Judas had done his dirty work, the disciples felt like there needed to be somebody to take his place. Well, there was a kind of a disruption. There was one man whose name was Matthes. And the other man's name, I wrote it down to its first chapter of Acts. Was it Justus?
I think it was,
Was it Justus? It doesn't matter. Anyway, so they decided that they would cast lots. They would vote. One for this fella or one for, what's his name?
Justice. Joseph, surname Justice.
My brain's still working. Anyway, when the lots were cast, the lots fell on Matthes. And so Matthes, it said, took the place of Judas Iscariot to make up 12 disciples. I don't know, you never have figured out whether that was of God or not. You never heard of Matthes again. He's never got in the writings of Paul or any of the epistles. Nothing there about it, whether that was of God or not. But I want to come back to you and to me, that you can justify in the church, not only Old Testament used this method, but you can see it in the New Testament, even with the choosing of Matthes. It's all right to vote in a church. And the rest of the people need to believe that whatever the choice is God's will. Even though it might not, well, I thought that wall ought to have been blue, and if it's not going to be blue, I'm leaving this church. I think it ought to be light green. Well, who thinks it ought to be light green? Who thinks it ought to be blue? And so the Blues lost 2 members of the church. Gone. Don't be dumb. Don't be stupid. Who cares whether it's blue, red, purple, or polka dot? It doesn't matter, really. You know what I'm talking about. And in our church, we train our people that way. We have election of officers every year. It doesn't amount to a hill of beans. Mainly, the nominating committee, which is made of the deacons, put down these nominees for these different offices. And usually somebody says, I make a motion that we accept them unanimously, and just go on. And mostly that happens. And there are sometimes people